Luigi says, oh, here we have a forger who just went down to the store in Europe and bought himself a piece of linen. He's like, wait a minute, okay. Again, this is a forger who didn't shop in Europe. He went, and he went so far as to go to the Middle East and procure a sample of linen from Egypt, because it could be from Egypt or Israel or somewhere else in the Middle East. In summary here, we have calcium complexes on the back of this cloth that are consistent with travertine aragonite limestone, which is consistent chemically with the limestone samples from Jerusalem area tombs. There are 6 types of pollen found on the shroud that are only found in Israel, and the 3-demone herringbone weave with cotton contaminants is consistent with 1st century Middle Eastern manufacture. All right, so if you take a look at everything our forger would have need to have known up to now, we have the negative imagery, the fact that this image is completely inverted and it's a negative image before the invention of photography. He had to have known the specific details concerning Roman crucifixion and torture, such as the flagra marks, the spear, the death by asphyxiation, up-down goniometry, and then we have a cloth consistent with 1st century Middle Eastern manufacture. And the 6 types of pollen from plants only found in Israel. Okay, and then the contaminants indicative of being in contact with Jerusalem limestone. Now, the last portion of the presentation, how did the image get on the cloth? Our forgers are saying, well, he simply painted it on, or he dusted it on. Somehow he used a man-made method to get the image onto the cloth. The problem is that we really cannot reproduce this, and I'll explain why this is not reproducible. In 1532, where there was a fire at the chapel of Chambry where the shroud was kept. And that fire got so hot that 1 drop of molten silver dripped onto the shroud. And it caused these burn markings that you see here, okay? Because the shroud was kept in a silver-lined casket. And so 1 drop of molten silver dripped onto the cloth, and it caused these burns here. Now the thing is that silver melts at 932 degrees. Celsius. 932 degrees. That's pretty hot. Now, if the shroud had been created using any type of organic paint, then what would have happened? Well, if this were a painted image, the paint would have volatilized or decomposed, or it would have vaporized, and what you would see is that the image closest to the burn marks would be darker or distorted compared to those farther away. But the burn marks had no effect on the image, none whatsoever. And that's what got scientists thinking, wait a minute, for those people saying that this was painted onto the cloth somehow, how do you explain that? Also, the shroud has water on it. I mean, not only when it was on fire, people threw water on it, and also there's evidence that the shroud was placed in a canister that may have had water on it as well. So the shroud has been exposed to water, and we can actually see water stains. Look at all these water stains on the cloth, okay? So we know that it's been exposed to water. But if you take a look at the image itself, as I mentioned, it only resides on one side of the cloth only, and it only penetrates into the cloth 125 1,000ths of a millimeter. It doesn't go deeper. It doesn't follow the water. Now, if this were some type of inorganic compound, like iron oxide, as Luigi would suggest, if this were some type of pigment like that, then it would have followed the water deeper into the cloth. It would have followed, it would have been diffusible. Even the moisture from the air would cause this chemical to go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This is basic chemistry. This is basic physics. Okay? There is no way it would stay just on the surface after being exposed to water. There is something called capillarity. You know what capillarity is? The movement up from high concentration to low concentration. There's no way that image would have stayed on one side of the cloth when it's exposed to water. It would have moved deeper into the cloth. It would have spread. There is no spread. Yeah?
I don't remember the specifics, but they were saying that, I've seen a few presentations. The one thing that they all said, almost like dismissive, is what we know it's not any type of dye or paint whatsoever.
Right.
They said when they actually analyzed the image, it said, that yellowish colored image, they said whatever it is, this isn't any type of dye, nor is it any type of paint.
No, you're exactly right, and those are the exact wordings. We're talking about things. This has 150,000 man-hours of study. It is the most studied artifact in history. Let me say that again. This is the most studied artifact in all of history. There is no other artifact anywhere that has a fraction of the investigation that this cloth has had. There are no paints or pigments on the cloth. None. Zero. So for this Garlischelli to get published, and to have it on the basis of his say-so, he didn't even reveal the results to the world. He says, tomorrow I show you what I find. And then he shows this cartoon, and everybody goes, what? Yeah.
Some scientists say it's the combination of the weather, the hot weather, the heat, and the dead body chemical.
Yes.
And the distance between skin and tumor.
Exactly. And so they're saying that what happened is this is basically a chemical image that was produced because a decomposing body can give off caustic compounds, which can then alter the nature of the cloth. Okay, and that would basically be a chemical. It would be chemically produced in that way.
If that was true, would there be a lot more of these? That lots of people wrapped it.
Well, possibly, but it could be maybe some rare conditions may have caused this. They're saying that this is something so rare it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The problem with that particular theory, there are many problems with it. Partly the problem is it's still a chemical process. It is an acid or base. What you're doing is you're causing a chemical reaction either through oxidation reduction or acid or base mechanism. So the chemicals are actually causing the physiologic change. That is, and when we take a look at the shroud, you see that particular process is subject to diffusion. So we would still, with that process, it would not just be a surface phenomenon. It would penetrate deeper into the cloth. In fact, areas that were closer to the cloth, like the tip of the nose, would penetrate deeper. If you got a decomposing nose that's next to the cloth, that is going to burrow deeper into the cloth than the cheeks that are farther away. Does that make sense? So the fact that it's superficial would suggest against that technique. Also, a chemical diffusion technique is very low resolution. There is no way a chemical diffusion mechanism is going to produce a high-resolution image. This is a very high-resolution image. It's not possible. There is no way to produce this through chemical diffusion. Can't be done. Nobody can reproduce it. So it's a pretty theory. It's one of the first theories that was put out there, actually. That's a very early forgery mechanism theory, but it's been shot to pieces. There's no way that could have done it. Yeah.
Yeah, if it was an acid or base reduction as well, wouldn't there be evidence of destruction of the bone?
If it's enough. I mean, again, with acid or base, with an acid-base reaction, if you have a very low concentration of your substance, it wouldn't cause massive destruction. It would just cause local destruction. Exactly. But again, diffusibility. This is a non-diffusible image. Okay, the fact that it's non-diffusible says this was not chemically induced. End of discussion. It's not possible. The fact that it's non-diffusible says that this in no way was caused by a direct contact chemical process.
Like you said, it's like a photo image as opposed to a painting image.
It had to, yeah. Okay. All right. In 1977, the Shroud of Turin Research Group, again, spent 150,000 man-hours studying this. And, they just took the pictures and gathered the data. The data took 20 years of analysis, in terms of coming out. Now, shortly after they started, actually that number is small. It's way over 150,000 hours now. So, that was way back then. It was 150,000 man-hours. Okay, so anyway, they did complete spectroscopic and chemical evaluation of the images and the samples, including photomicroscopy. And in fact, recently, the high-resolution images that have been taken of the shroud are much greater than they did here. Maybe in the news they talked about those new images that they've taken. They've gone through and taken postage stamp size pictures, and each picture has 1,000 megapixels. And so we're talking about microscopic, super high-resolution images. So that data is going to be coming out pretty soon too. So so we got still more data coming out. So we're far from finished looking at this thing. So anyway, they did photomicroscopy, looking at a microscope, and then they examined the physical properties of the cloth and the contaminants on the cloth. And essentially, here's our conclusions. And there are no paints or pigments on the shroud. That's it. This thing has been looked at under the microscope. The blood marks appear to be human blood, and now we know we have DNA evidence that the blood marks are human blood, and the image is a result of degraded cellulose, nothing more. In other words, the image that you see is the product of dehydrative acid oxidation resulting in the formation of a yellow carbonyl chromophore.